An ex-girlfriend from long ago suddenly reappears, rekindling an old flame with Stark. She showers him with affection, claiming she only wants his love in the present. But Stark senses something is wrong when a milky white fluid trickles from her lips. Unable to resist the temptation, he greedily kisses her, only to be viciously bitten to death. Smoker never imagined that their simple plan to return home and start a business would lead to his brother's gruesome demise. In 1930s Mississippi, in the American South, Sammy finishes his morning's work picking cotton. He casually tosses his tools into the storage shed, rinses the sweat from his body with cool water, and even finds a moment to tease his mother, who seems to have a leisurely day. However, this monotonous life is gradually dulling his youthful, sharp edge. Meanwhile, Smoker and Stark wait anxiously in front of a dilapidated warehouse. Hogwood arrives slowly in his truck, mentioning he used nearly all the best lumber in the area to build this warehouse back in the day. Curious about what the brothers plan to do with it, he advises them to stay out of trouble. But Smoker stands firm, declaring that since the property is now theirs, they have every right to use the land as they see fit. Sammy searches under his bed but can't find his beloved guitar. Frowning, he heads straight for his father's church, knowing his father must have hidden it. The preacher, his father, wants Sammy to follow in his footsteps and sees secular music as the devil's work, a temptation leading souls astray. He orders Sammy to study the Bible's chapters on resisting temptation, trying to bind his son with scripture. Sammy, long used to this, is inwardly defiant. After a week of sweating in the cotton fields, all he wants on his day off is to lose himself in music, dancing, and drink. As for whether God forgives him, that's God's business. Outside, Smoker and Stark pull up in their car, waving him over and promising to bring him back in one piece. The preacher watches them drive away, a strange sense of unease creeping into his heart. Smoker and Stark stop at a crossroads, surrounded by hidden caches of supplies for their future enterprise. As they discuss their plans, Stark decides the juke joint must open that very night. They split up to speed up the preparations. Smoker drives into town, pays a young girl to watch his truck, and enters a Chinese-owned general store. His old friend, Joe Bao, greets him with a warm embrace. Smoker asks for his help in promoting the joint and preparing a banquet for about $100. Joe Bao confidently promises to handle it. As they talk, the truck's horn blares. Smoker rushes out, draws his gun on a thief trying to steal his cargo, and fires a decisive shot that shatters the man's leg bone. The accomplice flees in terror, claiming he didn't know, but the girl had already warned him. With a cold glance, Smoker fires another shot, hitting the fleeing man squarely in the leg. He then tosses a wad of cash to Joe Bao, telling him to get the men medical care, a display of both power and mercy that solidifies his authority. Smoker announces a soft opening party at the juke joint that evening and says they need to gather all the necessary supplies. Feeling the pressure, Joe Bao sends his daughter to fetch his wife. She examines Smoker's list with a slight frown, and after some haggling, they strike a deal. Stark drives Sammy down a country road. Unlike the serious and focused Smoker, the dashing Stark tries to ignite Sammy's ambition, teaching him how to win a woman's heart. He compares pursuing a girl to tasting freshly made ice cream, sweet and tempting but fleeting. A man must act boldly in that brief window of opportunity. Stark is a significant figure for Sammy, always imparting life lessons. In contrast, Sammy's father is a rigid old preacher bent on controlling his son's future. Stark once faced a similar situation, his own father even tried to drug him into submission. If Smoker hadn't intervened, he would have been lost. For this, Sammy is eternally grateful to them both, relieved to have just escaped his father's grip. The car soon stops at the train station, where the sound of a harmonica drifts through the air. Slim is playing a mournful, moving tune. Sammy and Stark can't help but applaud. Stark introduces Sammy, boasting that his blues guitar skills are unmatched in these parts. Slim scoffs, doubting the young man could understand the true essence of the blues. Stark offers Slim a regular gig at the juke joint for $20 a night, plus authentic Irish beer. Slim's old bandmates are long gone, and the concept of partnership is a distant memory, but he agrees to show up for the opening. The promise of Irish beer, which he's never tasted, is an irresistible lure for the alcoholic musician. A glint appears in his eyes, and he nods, becoming one of Stark's key recruits. Stark, Sammy, and Slim put on an impromptu performance on the street by the train station to promote the juke joint's opening. Sammy's guitar and Slim's harmonica weave a soulful blues melody that draws a crowd. With his silver tongue, Stark passionately proclaims the juke joint as a haven exclusively for black people, filled with the blues music they love, with free drinks on opening night. Just then, a white woman about to board the train locks eyes with Stark, her expression one of utter shock. In the crowd, Sammy spots Pelin, the girl of his dreams. She is more stunning than ever. In the past, his shyness cost him the chance to speak to her, and she ended up marrying another man. Learning that Pelin will be at the joint tonight, Sammy's heart races as hope ignites within him to win her back. Sammy tells Stark that a woman in a white dress is staring at him. Stark recognizes her as Mary, his ex-girlfriend, and his expression tightens. In that era, a relationship between a black man and a white woman was a dangerous taboo. Mary, as beautiful as ever, approaches him with the fire of their old love in her eyes. Stark coldly warns her to keep her distance, trying to sever the connection. Their love had been intense, but for a womanizer like Stark, it was just a game. He never expected Mary to fall so deeply. Her persistence makes him sense trouble, and he furrows his brow. On the way to the plantation, they pass a group of prisoners at labor. They are Slim's old friends, with whom he used to travel the Delta, playing music before being arrested for vagrancy. A white sheriff once took them to a mansion full of white people to perform, where they made a lot of money. The white folks loved the blues, they just didn't like the people who created it. At the plantation, workers toil under the scorching sun, picking cotton. Stark drives right in, planning to recruit a strong man for security. He deliberately provokes a burly man in front of his wife, claiming a day's pay at the juke joint is more than months of labor on the plantation. Enraged, the man rips off his apron, his eyes burning with fury, ready to teach this insolent stranger a lesson.
Oh, that's a good woman. Come on.
Meanwhile, Smoker returns from town, stopping his car by an empty field. He picks a wildflower and gently places it before a strange symbol on the ground. A woman named Annie emerges from a wooden cabin, her gaze cold, scolding him for abandoning her years ago. She now supports herself and her grandmother with her own 2 hands and lives freely, mocking Smoker for being consumed by hatred and having no freedom at all. Smoker pulls out a token of their love, begging her to be the cook at the juke joint and fight for their people's dignity. Annie's eyes well up with tears as she hesitates. He whispers sweet nothings, each word filled with a deep affection she finds hard to resist. After a complex prayer ritual, their old passion reignites, and they make love in the cabin. Smoker and Stark return with the people they've recruited. Preparations for the opening are in full swing, and everything seems to be going smoothly. The Chinese couple leaves their daughter to mind the store and heads over to see Smoker's juke joint for themselves. As the sun sets, a stranger arrives at a distant farm. A man covered in wounds frantically pounds on the door, begging the farmer and his wife for help. He claims he's being chased by a group of people who killed his wife, and that he cowardly abandoned her to escape. Seeing his tear-streaked face and the last of his money offered in a desperate plea, the couple hesitantly takes him in. Soon after, a posse arrives, their leader convinced the man is hiding inside. The farmer's wife answers the door with a shotgun. The lead cowboy warns him to be careful of the man. As the sun disappears, the cowboy's companion urges him to leave. The wife lowers her guard and tells her husband to put down his gun, but he doesn't respond. She enters the dim room and opens a door to find her husband dead. The man they took in reveals his fangs, he's a vampire. A terrifying aura envelopes the farmhouse on this full moon night. Meanwhile, Smoker's juke joint officially opens to a crowd far larger than expected. Sammy gazes at the stage built for him, unable to contain his excitement. The dilapidated warehouse has been transformed into a gleaming dance hall and bar. As the party gets underway, Pelin arrives as promised, her enchanting presence captivating Sammy. Smoker, however, is unhappy with Stark for selling the liquor so cheaply. Stark argues that they can't use their Chicago tactics on workers who toil all week on the plantation. At the entrance, the bouncer stops an unexpected guest. The joint is only for black customers, and the white Mary is not welcome. But upon learning she is a friend of Stark's, his attitude changes, and he lets her in. Pelin marvels at the juke joint, amazed by their talent, especially when she learns Sammy is just a budding musician. Her eyes fill with admiration as she eagerly awaits his performance. Sammy, smitten, musters the courage to ask if her husband is coming. When he learns he isn't, a flicker of desire crosses his face. Sammy recognizes Mary from the train station. He introduces himself as Smoker's cousin, and Mary invites him for a drink. Seeing the Chinese proprietor's wife also there, Mary is relieved she isn't the only non-black guest. She hears Sammy can earn good commission working there and remarks that he has a good boss, but Sammy admits he has only invested so far, with no returns yet. Mary reveals she is half-black, though she takes after her mother's skin tone. She mentions her ill-fated romance with Stark, how her mother struggled to raise them, and her lingering regret that Stark and Smoker, despite pouring all their money into the juke joint, never even sent flowers to her mother's funeral. Smoker appears quietly behind Mary and sends Sammy away, seeing her complicated nature as a venomous snake that could poison the innocent Sammy. He warns Stark to stay away from her, but Stark is hooked on the thrill of their rekindled affair. Mary claims she only came for the blues and has no intention of speaking much with Stark. Smoker scoffs, suggesting she should contact her rich husband or pray she marries a white man in the future. Stark asks if she's bitter, insisting he loves her more than his own brother and would bring men to her aid if she were in trouble. Mary waits for him to speak from the heart. Stark removes his hat and makes a solemn vow, confessing he thinks of her every day. He explains he left only to protect her from his enemies, choosing the most painful path. His promise, filled with a sense of mission, convinces Mary of his love. Slim's piano music, gentle and captivating, fills the juke joint, mesmerizing the guests. A shy Sammy takes the stage with his guitar. At first, no one expects much from the unassuming young man. But then he begins to play a blues song he wrote himself, dedicating it to his father in the hope he might understand his choices. The music electrifies the room, pushing the celebration to its peak, the energy threatening to burn the roof down. Under the twinkling stars, the crowd dances and sings in the ruins, carrying on the soul of black culture. As the guests revel, the vampire and the farmer couple he turned approach silently, their eyes glowing strangely at the sound of the music. After a dance, Sammy, unable to resist Pelin's allure, pulls her into a passionate embrace. He loses himself in her sweet, pliant body. A passerby smirks knowingly at them. The bouncer at the door spots 3 white figures and assumes they're looking for trouble. He urgently calls for Smoker, who is busy showing Stark the night's earnings, a first step in their business empire. The lead white man, introducing himself as a traveling musician named Mick, says he was drawn by the music and just wants to come in for a drink, humbly pleading not to be turned away because of his skin color. He introduces his companions as a farming couple, Joan and Bert, and praises Sammy's guitar playing, eager to meet the talented musician. Smoker arrives, his attitude cold. He He flatly refuses them entry, stressing the joint is for black people only. Mick and his companions then reveal their instruments and play a lively but eerie tune, their movements unnervingly synchronized. Smoker dismisses it as jazz and tells them to go to the white bars in town, making it clear they are not welcome. Mick tries to plead again, but Smoker grips his gun, warning he'll shoot if they come any closer. Mick reluctantly retreats but doesn't go far. As a vampire, he needs an invitation from the master of the house to enter and establish his clan. He waits in the shadows, biding his time. Stark thinks Smoker is being paranoid, arguing that 3 traveling musicians with instruments are a common sight in the rural South and letting them in for a drink would be harmless. However, Smoker insists the juke joint will not serve whites, emphasizing they must stick to their rules, or it would ruin their original purpose. Stark reluctantly agrees, unaware that enforcing this rule to the letter might have averted a catastrophe. Sammy finds Smoker and thanks him for the platform to showcase his talent. Smoker counters that Sammy is gifted and just lacked an opportunity, like so many other black people whose brilliance has been suppressed by whites. Smoker dreams of building a world for them. Though heroic, he can't be everywhere at once. Hearing that Sammy now wants to make his own way in Chicago like him, Smoker is pleased, feeling he's finally becoming a man. But he reminds Sammy that outside his father's protection, countless exploiters are waiting. Courage is essential, but so is having the right person by your side. Mary tries to manipulate Stark, telling him he's blindly following Smoker and losing his own identity. She argues the 3 musicians meant no harm and Smoker's ban was too harsh. Borrowing Stark's gun, she claims she'll check them out and approaches the trio singing on the steps. Seeing her, Mick's eyes light up with opportunity. Mary's half-white heritage makes her resonate with their strange jazz music. She applauds, saying if they had money, she'd persuade Smoker to do business, as no one refuses profit. Mick offers her a gold nugget, claiming it's genuine and a gift to show his sincerity. Sensing her inner pain, he mentions he recently lost his mother and is traveling to cope, trying to build rapport through shared grief. He says he was drawn to the music by fate and is willing to listen to her troubles. But his thirst for blood soon reveals his true nature. He hints they could communicate more intimately, provided she accepts who he really is. Mary raises the gun, unafraid, believing she can walk away unharmed. Inside the juke joint, Pelin takes the stage, her singing igniting the atmosphere. The bouncer, lost in the rhythm, hears Mary ask to be let in. Without thinking, he nods and, after a brief hesitation, let her pass, unaware his lapse has sown the seeds of tragedy. Slim steps outside for some air, taking over for the bouncer, who leaves for a moment. Mary finds Stark and hands him a room key with a meaningful look. Stark is stunned. He never expected the usually aloof Mary to initiate a kiss, and it catches him completely off guard. Outside, the bouncer, feeling refreshed after relieving himself, senses movement in the darkness. 3 vampires are silently watching him. Suddenly, a commotion breaks out in the main hall. A man attacks one of Smoker's men. On the very first night, someone is already causing trouble. Mary leads Stark into a corner storeroom, an alluring scent wafting from her. As Pelin's voice echoes through the hall, Smoker is busy subduing the troublemaker. After knocking him down and checking what he stole, he curses his audacity. Stark, however, is lost in Mary's embrace. A hunger for blood flashes in her eyes, and a strange fluid dribbles from her lips. Stark mistakes it for saliva. As he leans in to kiss her, the vampire bite on her shoulder glows faintly red. After dealing with the troublemaker, Smoker looks for Sammy. Guided by Slim, he finds Stark and Mary entangled in a corner room. Sammy quickly shuts the door on the steamy scene, telling Smoker that Stark is busy. Smoker, guessing his brother is up to no good, wants to drag him out. Slim suggests waiting, but Smoker is fed up with his brother's recklessness. He shoves the door open, and his eyes widen in horror. Mary is pinning Stark to the floor, her teeth sunk deep into his neck. As Stark convulses in his death throes, Smoker, consumed by rage, unloads his pistol into her. The gunshots silence the entire bar. But in a horrifying twist, Mary rises with a sinister grin, completely unharmed. The crowd is stunned by Mary's unnatural state. Smoker ignores her, desperately pressing on Stark's wound, but it's too late. Stark dies in his arms. The loss of his brother sends tremors through his body. Annie tells Slim to hold back the guests, saying a death on opening night, especially one of the owners, is a terrible omen. Slim does his best to calm the crowd while the Chinese couple helps evacuate guests, trying to contain the news. Sammy blames himself. If he'd pulled Stark away sooner, this might have been avoided. Annie comforts him, saying no one could have predicted it and it wasn't his fault. Annie, sensing Mary's unnatural state, snaps Smoker back to reality. Stark was killed by her bite, he might turn. They need to move the body. Smoker, lost in grief, refuses to move his brother. Annie urges him to see the more immediate danger. Smoker still tries to save Stark, but Annie insists the body can't be revived. He has to face reality. The Chinese couple decides to leave. The husband, torn by his friendship with Smoker, agrees to start the car while he says his goodbyes. Before they can process their grief, the bouncer appears at the door, acting strangely. He asks Smoker, who is covered in blood, what happened. Though he could walk right in, he insists on being given permission. Annie grows suspicious, realizing he must be a vampire like Mary. A chill runs down their spines. The bouncer laughs, claiming he was just showing respect, and even tries to hug the grieving Smoker, accusing Annie of stirring up trouble. Slim points out he never needed an invitation before. The bouncer curses Smoker, calling him as hateful as a white man, then demands his wages, his hand reaching out but not crossing the threshold. Smoker, staying vigilant, hands him the money and then shoots him in the head. To their horror, the bouncer's head reforms, revealing the same vampiric features as Mary, his fangs glinting. Annie quickly pulls Smoker back, checking he wasn't bitten. Suddenly, a knock comes from the room where Stark's body is locked. A steel knife blade thrusts through the door, nearly impaling Sammy. Inside, Stark's neck is still bleeding. He has risen from the dead, transformed and terrifying. They can't believe it's happening. The reanimated Stark tries to appeal to Smoker with their past friendship, but when that fails, his bloodlust takes over, and he starts smashing the door. Unable to bear it, Smoker turns away. When Sammy goes to check, the vampiric Stark lunges. Annie quickly throws a cup of garlic water, and Stark's face smokes as he screams and flees. Smoker pulls Sammy to safety. The Chinese wife, realizing her husband never returned from starting the car, is frantic to go find him. Annie stops her, warning that going outside now is a death sentence. Their only hope is to hold out until dawn, when sunlight can destroy the vampires. All she can do is pray her husband found a safe place to hide. Annie urges everyone to prepare silver and garlic water. It won't kill the vampires, but it will slow them down. She explains that while human souls are reborn, vampires are trapped in their corpses, their eternal emptiness filled only by drinking blood. The bitten become part of the clan, losing all emotion except an endless thirst. They must be completely destroyed, or they will return. Annie has seen a glimmer of hope in a divination. If they survive until dawn, the sun will burn the demons away. She warns Smoker that if anyone is bitten, they must be cast out immediately, as a vampire cannot enter without an invitation. The priority is to ensure there are no traitors inside. The divination suggests Smoker is likely to survive. Annie makes him promise that if she turns, he must pierce her heart with a garlic-soaked weapon. In the main hall, they find another body, bitten to death. Sammy quickly drags it outside. In the distance, Mick's eerie music starts up again, and his enthralled clan begins to dance. Thunder rumbles as their numbers grow. Vampires cheer fanatically, craving blood and eternal life. Mick, seemingly ancient, revels in being surrounded by his own kind. Inside, the mood is grim. Annie makes everyone eat a clove of garlic, saying its scent repels vampires. As long as one of them survives until dawn, there's hope. The taste is overpowering. Pelin refuses, but Smoker forces her at gunpoint. Slim eats his but immediately vomits. Smoker raises his gun, but it turns out to be just a reaction from drinking, a false alarm. Suddenly, a drunk man who had passed out wakes up, thinking he's on the street. Hearing the vampires singing, he panics and pounds on the door. As Smoker moves to open it, the vampiric bouncer pounces on the man, tearing into him. The Chinese wife sees this but watches her husband outside ignore the attack with an unervingly blank expression. She realizes with dawning horror that Mick has already turned him. Mick, his mouth dripping with blood, taunts them, calling eternal life a gift. He preys on the wife's despair, promising a reunion with her husband if she opens the door, using his knowledge of her memories and speaking in Chinese to threaten her with 100 forms of torture. Mick then turns to Sammy, smiling sincerely, saying his music awakened a long-dormant passion that led him there. He offers a deal, hand over Sammy, and he and his clan will leave. Guilt-ridden, Sammy starts to step forward, but the others hold him back, refusing to trade with a demon. Mick urges Smoker to consider his offer, revealing a memory he read. The next day, Hogwood is coming for revenge with a posse. Better to join the clan and slaughter their enemies than die by their guns. Annie asks Mary why she hasn't left. Mary claims she wants to be with her family. The bitten man on the floor rises, declaring that being reborn has made everything new. The vampiric Stark tries to persuade Smoker, saying they always sought freedom, and eternal life is the ultimate form of it, no enemies, no fear. Smoker's hands tremble, his brotherly bond nearly convincing him. Sammy and Slim pull him back and slam the door shut, cutting off the temptation. The Chinese wife, at her breaking point, screams at Smoker. The man who once shot thieves without hesitation is now faltering at the sight of his own brother. While she berates him, she begins making Molotov cocktails. Outside, the vampires, driven by bloodlust, surround the juke joint. Seeing her husband's vampiric form and thinking of her daughter at home, the wife, filled with grief and rage, grabs a wooden stake and rushes outside, choosing to fight rather than wait.
Come on in, you motherfucker!
How you doing?
Mick hears her roar and, taking it as an invitation, grins. She plunges the stake into her husband's heart, taking him with her. The remaining survivors fight desperately against the flood of vampires, but one by one, they fall. Annie and Smoker fight back to back, cutting down vampires left and right. As Annie fends off Mick with garlic water, another vampire attacks her from behind, its fangs sinking into her throat. Smoker watches in horror as Annie falls. The vampire who killed her is Stark. As Pelin and Sammy provide covering fire, Smoker rushes to Annie. She reminds him of his promise. To prevent her from turning, Smoker tearfully drives the wooden stake through her heart, shocking Mary and Stark. As the vampires regroup, Slim shoves the others toward the second floor, staying behind to buy them time. He slits his wrist to draw the vampires to him, but Mick appears and kills him instantly. Pelin seizes the chance to stab Mick through the heart, saving Sammy, but is bitten and killed in the process. As Stark pins Smoker down, Smoker manages to fire his gun, forcing Mick back. Sammy, heartbroken, jumps from the second floor. He tries to flee on a broken leg but is caught by Mick, who plans to turn him so they can share music for eternity. Reciting Bible verses his father taught him, Sammy stalls for time, enraging Mick but giving Smoker an opening. Sammy smashes his guitar over Mick's head. The blow injures their shared consciousness, and Mick's skull cracks. Smoker attacks, driving a wooden stake through Mick's heart. As the first rays of dawn appear, the vampires turn to ash. Mick falls, his evil life consumed by flames. Only Smoker and Sammy survive. Smoker tells Sammy to grab an iron box from the truck and leave. Smoker's fight for his people's dignity will continue, but Sammy's mission is to live and tell their story. Sammy drives back to his father's church, holding the broken neck of his guitar, his body battered but his gaze firm. Smoker looks at the ruin of their juke joint, a would-be heaven that became a hell in one night. Far off, engines roar. Hogwood and the KKK have arrived. Smoker opens the iron box. Compared to vampires, these men will be much easier to deal with. Sammy tells his father he's going to Chicago to follow his dream. At that same moment, Smoker emerges from the woods with a Thompson submachine gun, mowing down Hogwood's men. Wounded and dizzy from blood loss, he walks toward Hogwood, who offers him a final cigarette. Smoker falls, seeing a vision of his family, his final redemption. Annoyed that Hogwood is interrupting this reunion, he raises his gun and riddles him with bullets before embracing the child in Annie's arms in his vision, a genuine smile on his face. 60 years later, on a Chicago street, an elderly Sammy plays his beloved guitar, singing the story of his friends, ensuring the legend of these heroes is never forgotten.